Most people never noticed the boy at the back of the bus. But that's how Aiden Carter liked it. Headphones in, hoodie up, notebook on his knee. The bus lurched along the snowy backroads of western Pennsylvania, carrying him away from what everyone told him he'd never outrun, the kind of poverty that stuck to your ribs like stale bread. Outside, the dawn light turned the frost on the window into silver veins. Aiden traced them with a finger, then glanced down at the letter tucked into his pocket. Yale University Winter Invitational Debate Tournament. He'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. Aiden Carter. Age 22. No fancy resume, no famous coach, no legacy behind his name. Just a stubborn grit that had carried him through more nights than he could count, nights spent flipping burgers at Denny's until 2 a.m., then scribbling counterarguments on napkins during his 15-minute break. His mother used to say words were his armor. She'd taught him that before she died, when he was 17 and the bills were stacked taller than the refrigerator. The bus rolled to a stop outside his college, a squat, aging building with chipped bricks and a sign that read Shady Hollow Community College. The place had no right sending anyone to Yale's debate halls. But last spring, Aiden had won the state regionals when the favored school's captain slipped up on a policy detail. One opening, and Aiden had driven through it like a freight train. He'd never forgotten the look on the judges' faces, surprise that turned to something like respect. It tasted better than any meal he'd skipped for it. He stepped off the bus, boots crunching on the frozen gravel. His coach, Professor Reinhardt, was waiting by the side door. Reinhardt was a kind man in his 50s, sleeves always rolled up, tie always crooked, but there was worry in his eyes this morning. "You sure about this, Aiden?" Reinhardt asked, voice low enough to keep from waking the campus squirrels. Aiden pushed his glasses up. "You told me once the only thing that matters is the argument." Reinhardt sighed, scratching his chin. "It matters, sure. But so do names. So do donations. So does the weight of where you're standing. You walk into Yale's main hall, you're on their turf. They'll smell blood." Aiden managed a grin. "Then I better make them choke on it." He said it braver than he felt. His suitcase rattled behind him as they crossed the lot to Reinhardt's old pickup. A battered Ford that looked about ready to retire. Kinda like Reinhardt himself. The arrival. 6 hours later, the bus hissed to a halt in New Haven. Aiden stepped off into a world that didn't look like it had ever heard the word poor. The buildings rose like carved marble cliffs. Students drifted past him in pressed coats and polished shoes, like they'd all been born already dressed for success. His room was a basement dorm at the far edge of campus. Bare bulb, thin mattress. Good enough. He dropped his bag, pulled out his notebook, and set his single tie on the desk. Navy blue, from a thrift shop. He'd ironed it 3 times. It still looked like it had seen a funeral or two. He didn't bother unpacking. There wouldn't be time for laundry. He had 3 hours until the opening ceremony. So he sat cross-legged on the floor, index cards fanned out around him like a gambler's last hand. He whispered to himself, testing lines. The opening statement. The pivot. The rhetorical trap. The closer. Again and again. His throat got raw. He didn't care. When he stuttered, and sometimes he did, a ghost from when he was 6, he paused, took a breath, said it again until the syllables obeyed. When the knock came, he jumped. Reinhardt pushed the door open with a soft grunt. He'd just come from the judge's briefing, and the lines on his forehead were deeper than before. "Come on," he said, half smiling. "You ready to see the sharks up close?" The ceremony. The Sterling Memorial Library's Great Hall looked like something carved out of history. Stone arches, wood panels, portraits of old men staring down their noses at anyone who dared speak too loud. Aiden stood near the back with Reinhardt, trying to keep his hands from fidgeting. The room buzzed with soft laughter and polite mockery. He heard it in snatches. That's the kid from Shady Hollow, right? Community college. Ha. What's he gonna debate? How to get a third job? Probably here for the free food. It stung more than he'd admit. He focused on a single detail, the gleam of brass on the doorknob across the room, anything to drown them out. Then they called his name. Aiden Carter, Shady Hollow College. A polite smattering of applause. He stepped forward to shake hands with the tournament director, a thin man with the stiff smile of someone who'd rather not be touched. Lawrence Whitaker was next. Captain of Yale's team. His suit cost more than Aiden's rent for 6 months. His handshake was limp, eyes half-lidded, voice slick as oil. "Hope you brought your best, Carter," Lawrence said, leaning in. "Or at least a decent tie." The teammates behind him snickered. Aiden just nodded, squeezing Lawrence's hand harder than necessary. He thought about his mother, about the bus, about the night scrubbing grease off his apron. He let all that weight anchor him. He wouldn't flinch. The first clash. Round 1 was that afternoon, not even time to catch a real meal. Reinhardt handed him a protein bar and clapped him on the back. Just survive the first. Learn their rhythm. Aiden stood outside room 217, staring at the door like it might bite him. Inside were 3 students from Columbia, slick hair, crisp suits, laughing as they set up their tablets. When he stepped in, the laughter paused for half a heartbeat, then came back, softer this time. Private. Mocking. Aiden laid out his single notebook. No fancy slides, no team logo. Just paper, ink, and the words in his head. The moderator called for quiet. Topic: Should private universities abolish legacy admissions? Affirmative goes to Carter. He stood. Cleared his throat. The old stutter fluttered in his chest like a moth trying to get out. He could hear them waiting for it, for him to stumble, to crack. He pictured his mother's voice instead. "Words are your armor, baby. Speak slow. Let them come to you." So he did. His opening was shaky. A cough slipped in. One of the Columbia boys hid a grin behind his palm. But then he found it, the beat, the hook, the turning point. He flipped their smug questions back at them. Cited a study they hadn't prepared for. Dug in, word by word, as if clawing handholds into a cliff. For a flicker of a moment, the laughter stopped. He caught one judge's pen pause mid-note. That was enough. He pressed harder. When it ended, he sat down, chest heaving. He knew he hadn't won, but he hadn't drowned either. Outside, Reinhardt clapped him on the shoulder. Not bad for round 1. You made them sweat at the end. Aiden shook his head. I hesitated. I cracked. Reinhardt smiled. Good. Now they'll underestimate you. Back in the basement. That night, Aiden sat on the cold dorm floor again. He replayed the round in his head, every flub, every misstep. He wrote notes until his hand cramped. He knew the real fight hadn't even started yet. Above him, somewhere in those stone halls, Lawrence Whitaker was probably drinking a toast to the easy prey tomorrow would bring. Let him toast. Let him laugh. Tomorrow, Aiden thought, they'd learn that not everything broken stays broken. Aiden barely slept that night. He lay on the narrow mattress in the basement dorm, staring at the cracks in the ceiling like they were maps he needed to memorize. His throat was raw from whispering lines to himself over and over. Each time he stumbled, he pictured Lawrence's smug grin, the ripple of polite laughter from the audience, fuel for the next attempt. By dawn, his eyes burned. But the exhaustion felt like armor. Sleep was for kids who didn't have to fight for their place at the table. Morning in the shadows. He slipped out before the dining hall opened, a protein bar in his pocket, notebook under his arm. The campus was silent, frost curling on the ancient stone. He found a corner of the main quad where the wind bit his ears and his breath looked like smoke. He spoke to the empty courtyard like it was his first audience, pacing, gesturing, building the rhythm until the words felt natural in his mouth. He didn't hear her approach until she cleared her throat. He turned, startled. An older black woman in a faded Yale facilities jacket stood a few yards away, pushing a battered mop bucket through the frost. "You practicing for your big show?" she asked, eyebrow raised, half amused. Aiden flushed. "Sorry, I didn't think anyone was around." "I been around longer than these fancy bricks." She nodded at his notebook. "What's your piece about?" Aiden hesitated, then shrugged. "Legacy admissions. Power. Who deserves a chance?" She chuckled. "Ain't that the truth?" She extended a gloved hand. "Evelyn. Been cleaning this place 30 years. Seen a lot of boys stand where you're standing." Aiden shook her hand. "Aiden. Don't let them tell you you don't belong, Aiden," Evelyn said, eyes twinkling under the brim of her knit cap. "They laugh now. They won't be laughing long, not if you know what you're talking about." He tucked that line away. He liked how it sounded. Round 2. Round 2 was tougher, a bigger audience, harder topic: should national security override individual privacy? Aiden sat on the panel opposite a team from Princeton. 2 girls and a boy, slick hair, designer watches flashing under the lights. Their opening was sharp, well-rehearsed, dripping with data. The crowd murmured approval, they were the favorites. Then it was Aiden's turn. He rose. The stutter tickled his throat again, old ghost, old wound. He swallowed it down. He didn't try to match their data with more data. Instead, he told them about his mother, how the Patriot Act let the government tap the phones of low-income families like his, looking for crime where there was none. He painted a picture of dignity, of the invisible lines between security and abuse. Halfway through, the room shifted. The Princeton team exchanged nervous glances. He felt it, the pivot. He pressed harder. By the time he sat down, a silence hummed in the room like an electric fence. The judges scribbled furiously. One of the Princeton debaters opened her mouth to rebut but fumbled her first line. They hadn't expected him to go for the gut. When the scores came down, Princeton still edged him out by a single point. But the margin didn't matter. Word spread fast in halls like this. Whispers and knives. At lunch, Aiden sat alone on a stone bench, scarfing down a sandwich Reinhardt had forced into his hand. He felt the eyes on him, other teams drifting by in huddles, glancing at him like he was an uninvited storm cloud. He overheard snippets. "He's good, but he's sloppy, no real team. That kid? The community college one? He's a charity slot. They'll eat him alive in the semifinals if he even gets that far." He almost laughed. They still didn't get it. He didn't care about the odds. He never had the odds. The only thing that mattered was the argument. He flipped open his notebook again. Rewrote his closing. Rewrote it 5 times. He didn't notice the cold until his fingers went stiff. A friend in the shadows. That evening, he found Evelyn again, this time in the basement hall, where she was buffing the marble floors outside the practice rooms. "You win today?" she asked without looking up. "Lost by a point." But they looked rattled. Evelyn chuckled. "That's how you start. Rattle them till they can't remember they're supposed to be better than you." She leaned her mop against the wall and dug in her pocket, pulling out a faded leather-bound notebook. "You know, my brother used to stand where you're standing. Came here on scholarship in '88. Thought he'd change the world. He didn't have no fancy suits either." Aiden's eyebrows rose. "What happened to him?" "He won too much," Evelyn said, voice tightening. "Yale's golden boys didn't like that. They bent the rules, pushed him out. He died thinking he didn't belong here. But he did. Just like you do. She pressed the notebook into Aiden's hands. These are his notes. Rhetorical traps, pivot lines, reversals. Use M. Make M listen this time. Aiden turned the pages gently. Tiny handwriting, ink faded but sharp. His chest tightened. I don't know what to say, he began. Say thank you by making M remember your name, Evelyn said. She picked up her mop again. Go on, now. You got a stage to break. The dinner trap. By the time the semi-final pairings were posted, the tension on campus felt like static. Aiden's next opponent, the reigning Yale team. Lawrence Whitaker himself. Reinhardt caught Aiden outside the posting board, his face pale. They're going to come for you hard, Aiden. They want you humiliated before you even open your mouth. Don't let them get in your head. Aiden just nodded, gripping Evelyn's notebook like a shield. That night, Yale hosted the social mixer, an old tradition where rivals mingled before the semis. Reinhardt told Aiden not to go. But Aiden went anyway. He found himself standing near the buffet table, a soda in hand, tied too tight. Across the room, Lawrence caught his eye, and smiled the way wolves might smile at a limping deer. Lawrence drifted over, entourage in tow. He held a glass of wine, swirling it lazily. Carter, right? Lawrence said, voice pitched just loud enough for the surrounding students to hush and lean in. Tell me, do they have catering at your little community shack, or is this the fanciest food you've ever seen? Aiden bit his tongue. Lawrence pressed closer. Must be nice for your mother, right? Seeing you here. Wait, she alive to see this? Aiden froze. A laugh rippled through Lawrence's circle. Lawrence leaned in so close Aiden could smell the wine. You're a charity slot, Carter. A prop. Tomorrow, you'll remind everyone why bloodlines matter. Aiden's vision tunneled. His hands shook. But deep under the rage, something cold settled in his gut, a promise that tomorrow, he'd make Lawrence eat every word. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked out, leaving the laughter behind him. A promise in the dark. That night, Aiden sat on the floor again. Reinhardt knocked once, cracked the door. You okay? He asked. Aiden didn't look up. I'm going to bury them tomorrow. All of them. Reinhardt smiled, sad and proud at the same time. Then get some sleep, champ. But Aiden didn't sleep. He sat with Evelyn's notebook in his lap, whispering lines into the dark. In his mind, the great hall was already full. The laughter was already ringing. He could see Lawrence's grin. He could hear his mother's voice cutting through it all. Words are your armor, baby. Make them listen. He was ready, the great hall buzzed with a low hum that felt alive, 1,000 whispered wagers, 100 phone cameras waiting for the knockout. Above it all, the portraits of Yale's founders stared down from their varnished frames like silent judges. The morning light spilled through the stained glass in slanted beams, falling right where Aiden Carter stood alone at the edge of the stage. He'd slept maybe an hour, head on Evelyn's notebook, half dreaming of counters and pivots and traps that bit like bear claws. Now he flexed his hands at his sides, feeling the sweat under his collar, the rough edge of his thrift store tie against his throat. Across the aisle, Lawrence Whitaker and his team lounged in tailored suits, laughing like this was just another dress rehearsal for power. Lawrence leaned back in his chair, twirling a pen between his fingers as if the outcome was already written. Reinhardt sat behind Aiden in the coaching box, his eyes dark hollows of worry and pride. Evelyn wasn't there, she'd slipped him a note that morning, wishing him luck, promising she'd watch online from the staff lounge. Make M listen, baby. Make M listen. The moderator, a sharp woman with the clipped vowels of old money, called the room to order. Silence rolled over the marble like a hush before a storm. Final round, resolved, civil disobedience is a moral imperative in the face of unjust laws. Yale University argues the negative. Shady Hollow College argues the affirmative. A polite ripple of chuckles. Aiden heard it but didn't feel it this time. He felt only the pulse in his neck, steady as a war drum. Opening salvos. Lawrence rose first, smoothing his jacket with theatrical precision. He spoke with the polish of someone who'd been trained to dominate rooms like this since birth. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand today not to praise chaos but to protect order. My esteemed opponent would have you believe that when you don't like a law, you simply break it. Where does that end? Anarchy? Mob rule? He gestured at Aiden, palms up, a mocking invitation. If he has his way, your neighbor can burn down your house because he doesn't like your fence. A polite laugh. Lawrence sat, legs crossed, eyes gleaming. He tapped his pen on the table, a little code, your turn, charity case. Aiden stood. He let the silence stretch just long enough for the laughter to itch. He flipped open Evelyn's notebook, not because he needed it, but because he wanted them to see it. The old pages, the ghost of every voice they tried to silence before him. When he spoke, his voice was low. Slow. When Rosa Parks sat where they told her not to sit, that was civil disobedience. When Gandhi led his people to salt they were forbidden to touch, that was civil disobedience. And when Dr. King marched across Selma's bridge, that was civil disobedience. He stepped forward, closing the space between him and Lawrence with every word. If they'd obeyed unjust laws, if they'd accepted what they were given, half this room wouldn't be here to laugh at me today. A hush. Not polite this time. Real. Aiden pressed his palm to the podium. Felt its smoothness like cold steel. You want to talk about chaos? Try living under laws that treat you like you don't belong. That is chaos. That is violence, the quiet, everyday violence we're told to accept politely. He let the silence breathe. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then he smiled, just a flicker. Your turn. The counterattack. Lawrence was up like a shot, grin tightening at the edges. Emotional appeals are cute, he said, pacing like a man on a private stage. But we're not here for bedtime stories about the 60s. We live in a lawful society. If everyone who felt wrong decided to break the law. He leaned in, voice dripping poison. We'd have people like my opponent here deciding which laws count. And when the angry break things, who pays? People like you. Honest people. He turned to the judges, delivering the final twist with a smile. If you reward this rhetoric, you reward vandalism disguised as virtue. He sat. A spatter of applause from the Yale side.